Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thank you all for joining me at this time. My name is Shavi Zane, and I'm coming on to have a quick discussion with you all in regards to alchemy, the use of alchemy, why you're being called to tap into your ability as a natural alchemist. And we'll talk about why people shun it sometimes and what's the fear that's behind it. So, for those of you who are not familiar with the term alchemy, alchemy is the shifting of energy, the changing of one material to another or one substance to another. For instance, you do alchemy every day. If you're a coffee drinker, then you are an alchemist, right? You'll take the water, you're going to take it from one temperature to a boiling point. You're going to take that solid ground coffee, and you're going to turn it into a liquid by putting it into that hot water and watching it melt. So you are watching it go through a alchemical process, right? And so we do alchemy every day without necessarily being intentional with it in other areas of our lives, right? So a lot of people don't realize that they're already doing alchemy, and they are, in fact, doing alchemy. Now, with that being said, when you get on the spiritual path, these types of conversations come up. Even if you're not necessarily looking for it, you begin to understand that alchemy is a necessary component on your journey. And that's where a lot of people get afraid. They begin to shy away from the idea of doing what some what's called magic, right? Because there's been this negative connotation behind magic for so long, whether it was through your fairy tales, where it's always the wicked witch, whether it's Snow White or uh, Cinderella or Pinocchio. I mean, I guess it's a whole lot of movies. Of course, there are, Princess and the Frog, where there's always this negative connotation behind alchemy to make you shy away from it. And let's not forget what's been taught traditionally in particular religions and texts that tells you that divination is wicked, right? And that anything that um, looks like magic is wicked, which is very contradictory because the Christ that is referenced in the biblical text performed a lot of alchemy. Not just the Christ, but you're talking about Moses, who will have lifted up uh, the the staff, and it will have turned into a snake, right? Or cast the staff down and it turned into a snake, or parted the Red Sea with the staff. Like, it was a whole lot of magic that was happening in biblical reference, right? So we've heard about this for a long time, and a lot of people shied away from it. Some of you have gravitated towards it, recognizing that the wickedness is only in the person. It's not in the tool, but it's in the person. It's behind the intentions. What are the intentions? What are you using this alchemy for? Now, the term alchemy is it's from ancient times when people used to, one reference was trying to turn base metal into gold, right? Uh, Wanting to shift the makeup of something into something that was far more valuable. Because, of course, what's the purpose of doing it if you're not going to shift it for a good reason? But consider that it did get perverted, where a lot of people began to learn about alchemy. It got into the hands of the wrong people, right? And they started to pervert it and use it for evil and not for good. But initially, from our indigenous ways and our origin, we utilized alchemy to heal ourselves, to heal others, to shift, nature, to activate particular things, to communicate, um, to create wealth, to build. Like, we used alchemy in ways that was beneficial to humanity, is really what I'm saying. So alchemy has been used since the beginning of time. Now, where we are today is a lot of scientists use what is called chemistry, right? Chemistry is actually a derivative of alchemy. The chemists today actually are mimicking what we did, back in the day, and we're currently doing it now, many of you who are awakened, but the chemistry came from alchemy. Okay, alchemy, chemistry, that's all in alignment. But the difference is they're taking the spiritual aspect of it out and being more logical, like what logically makes sense in terms of how air works with water to create this, or how fire works with air to create that, or how this particular chemical works with that chemical to turn into whatever, right? But consider that the original chemistry is alchemy, because alchemy means the chemistry. Al means the, and then of course, chemistry. Now, some people might even connect that to Kemet, right? I'm sure that there's a lot of people who have that deeper understanding about Kemet, would also connect alchemy, Kemet, chemistry. All of those things are used interchangeably. I don't have a lot of deep knowledge. Well, I guess I don't remember those things. I would have to remind myself of how those things are interconnected, but that's just what I heard, right? So today's chemistry literally comes from our original alchemy, but they took out the spiritual aspect, the spiritual nature of it. So alchemy is the chemistry, it is the original. Okay. And so everything that falls behind it is pretty much a generic um, presentation of the original. And so a lot of times people shy away from alchemy because of what they've been taught. Now, as a spiritual being, as a spirit having a human experience, a lot of people shy away from it because they've watched people use alchemy or magic, or what some might even call sorcery, for greed, right? For purposes of evil, to work up against others. And so there's this fear that says, I don't want to do the wrong thing. I don't want to go against what the Most High has guided me to do. I don't want XYZ. I don't want, I don't want it. I want. So they're already walking into the idea with a pessimistic mindset. But consider, even if we go back to sorcery, the word sorcery, the main word in sorcery is source. So you want to consider, when it comes down to sorcery, what is the source? What is the origin? Where is this coming from? This is why I always tell people it is very important for you to do your own alchemy. For if you're going to be a sorcerer, if you're going to do your own sorcery, you need to know the source by which it's coming from. Because if you have other people doing things for you and you call that person up and say, hey, I'm dealing with XYZ, I lost my job, I lost my wife, I lost, my business, and you're just, life is just all this chaos, right? It's just chaos all around you. And you're calling someone who presents themselves as a high priest or a high priestess, and they are supposed to possess these spiritual gifts to be able to shift your circumstances. It is very, very, very vital to understand the source by which they connect, as well as the source that exists within them. If you don't understand the source and you got that person doing sorcery on your behalf, then they can most certainly conjure up some energy that you will later regret, largely because many of these beings, they do things that you may see temporary change, but if they are only concerned about material abundance, then they will give you a temporary fix that will require of you something later. And it's usually something that does not feel so good. You see what I'm saying? Whatever that source is, it's going to have, is if it's going to give something, it's going to most certainly require something. And so this is why you don't inquire to those who you don't understand the source that exists within them, nor the source that they are connecting with in order to conjure up or to do something on your behalf. So in other words, do it yourself. Never let anybody else do it for you. And that's why when people come to me, I've had many, many, many people ask me, can I pay you to do this for me or that for me? And I always say, no, I reject it right away, because I'm all about teaching people how to be self-reliant, how to learn how to step into your own power, because we all have the ability to alchemize and to transmute our own experience. A lot of times people go to others to do alchemy for them because they feel like they are powerless in their situation. And they say, but It's a group over there. They're very, very powerful. And they've been doing spell work. And I watched this happen in my life. And I watched them do this to that person in XYZ. And so they've developed this innate fear of, other people having more control over their experience than they do. And that's just giving your power away. That's saying you will never possess the authority to shift your own circumstances. So you will always have this spiritual codependency on someone who either claims to know how to fix your situation, or you give your power over to the ones who are literally working against you to keep you in that stuck place. So I always promote healing yourself, finding your internal power again so that you can begin to do your own alchemy. And also consider that alchemy comes from, it starts with your internal energy, right? Alchemy starts from within. Alchemy begins with your thoughts. There's nothing more powerful than someone who knows how to manage and organize their own thoughts. There's nothing more powerful, because you can have, I don't care how many cows' tongues you get, I don't care how many chickens you have beat upon your back, I don't care how much graveyard dirt you dig, okay? Because I don't promote those particular forms of alchemy. But I'm telling you, it doesn't matter how many physical tools you will use in order to try to make something happen. If the mind is not in alignment with the action, then it's not going to work. So let's just say you're over there. You've been working on your thoughts like major. You checking yourself. Anytime you have a low vibrational thought, or you find yourself getting off into your head too much, or in survival mode, or overthinking a situation, you check yourself right away, right? That's the only thing that you really know to do, is check yourself, get grounded, stabilize your thoughts, right? Organize your thoughts better. That in and of itself is powerful. Let's just say your neighbor down the street, they don't like you, and they're like, they're over there doing their magic or their sorcery from behind the scenes, and they're hoping that you'll fail. They're hoping that whatever you're working on will not progress, and all of these other things. So they're over there whipping up the witch's brew, right? But you have come to a state of practically mastering your thoughts. Do you know how powerful that is? Because that is the most powerful form of alchemy, is through spelling. Spelling is through your words, your thoughts. How do you process things? Okay. And so, because you will have mastered that, it doesn't matter how much spell work people do against you, your internal spelling, okay, what you visualize, what you think about, the reality that you have created within your own mind is literally is up and is stuck. Okay, you put it up into the spiritual realm, and it will manifest into your 3D reality without you doing anything else. And so whoever is working up against you, their magic will fail every time, because it begins with your thoughts. So recognizing that alchemy is not as complex as a lot of people want to make it out to be. Your thoughts create things. And so that's the first, we're talking about, that's the first form of alchemy, the first form of chemistry. You thinking something, it literally forms, and it begins to trickle down and manifest into your 3D reality. Whether you're thinking things that you want to create for yourself, or thinking things that you don't want to create for yourself, either way, we are always, always a co-creator in this human experience, whether you are consciously aware of it or not. So when you get on a spiritual journey, and you are now consciously aware of your ability to shift your circumstances, that definitely puts you in a power position in this game called life. It puts you in a power position, because at this point, now you are intentional about what you want and how you want it to turn out for yourself. I was speaking to somebody recently, and shout out to you if you're watching. I won't mention any names, of course, for privacy. But this particular young lady said to me, and she's had the best of intentions, but she's just now getting on the spiritual path, right? And she said, I just want to do the right thing by the Most High. I don't want the Most High to, I don't want to be in the wrong or out here doing something that goes against the Most High. So a lot of times I just go by the book. And it stood out to me when she said that. And right away I stopped her and I said, every book known across the globe, every single book across the globe was written by man, every single one of them. And so I asked her, I'm not sure which referencing when you say, I just want to walk, I want to go by the book. But consider you have already, she will have already failed off the strength that her walk is based on a book, because a book is written by the belief systems, the principles, the standards, or the understanding of man. A man wrote what he thought. A man wrote what he um, interpreted this human experience to be. A man wrote what he thought morals look like, or he wrote what he thought spirituality or ritualistic practices should look like. A man put these things in a book. And not saying that you should completely discard what man writes, because these are accounts from other people that can help to activate something within you. But when you live by the book, then you are no longer living by the standards of the Most High Mother and Father. You are now living by the standards of that man who wrote that book. And so therefore that man has become your God. So you're already out of order. This is why it's so important for when you're just now getting on a spiritual journey, you want to draw more inward rather than outward. A lot of people, I've had people ask me, hey, well, what books can you refer me to in order to have a clearer understanding? And I always tell people, read the energy. I don't read a lot of books, but I read energy often, far more often than I read texts. And like I said, I am not taking away from the value that comes through written word by other men's accounts or their understanding. I'm not taking anything away from that, because there will be texts that can activate something in you. It can remind you of something that's already encoded in your DNA. That's really what it's all about, bringing you into remembrance. So certain things can jog your memory and activate certain things within you. Okay. But never take a text or a book and say that I live by that, because you will be then living by the standards of that man, and that man will then become your God. And that's not the way to go. So go inward first. Analyze your thoughts. How do you feel? And then after you go inward and you've done a full evaluation of what's happening within you, what traumas did you need to sort through? What fears do you need to address? Are you in survival mode? Are you ego driven? Are you sitting in your carnal nature? Are you focused on what you want? Or are you overly consumed with what you don't want? Like, that's where you want to begin first. Before you pick up any book, read the energy, your energy first. Then after you have done that, then focus it outward. Look around. Before you pick up any book, look around. Because I can guarantee you that any book that's of substance, any book that you may later go on to read that's of substance that's really going to help to enlighten you and to develop you, is going to always be a direct reflection of what you will have already observed in your own reading of this human experience. So you're on a spiritual journey, and now there's a draw. You have this desire to be closer to nature. So you start observing the plant, and you look at the grass, and you look at the trees, and you start to look at the shapes and the lines and the symmetry. You start to look at the synchronicities and the similarities and everything. You're looking at your fingerprints, and you're seeing these swirls that looks very similar to the barks of trees, and you're starting to see like just various things, and the insects and the animals. And over time you begin to develop this understanding, like a very deep understanding of what this thing is really all about. So at that point, now you've come into remembrance that all of these things are interconnected in some way, and all of these things possess great information. You can get a whole lot of wisdom just by simply observing a tree. It'll take you like literally a spiraling of information, revelation after revelation by the simple observance of a tree or a bird or a caterpillar. Okay. So now that you've gotten into reading your energy and then reading the energy of nature, then you can further nurture that understanding through texts that other people will have written based on their own experience, their own revelations, their own decodings, right? Whether it's ancient texts that goes all the way back to ancient Egypt or something that was written by somebody 2 months ago. Either way, it's all going to come back to the same cycle of life. And this is where you're able to decipher what's real versus what's not. This is where you're able to decipher what's taking you closer to the divinity, to the divine self, what's rising, what's going to evolve you, what's going to get you closer to the Most High Mother and Father versus what is actually taking you further away. Okay. Let me see. You will be able to decipher who's making this thing way too complex, right? Because there is such thing as alchemy being too complex. Just like the examples that I mentioned earlier, sacrificing people is a form of alchemy that is way too complex. These things require a sacrifice that feeds low vibrational deities, where it's like if you want something big, then you have to sacrifice something big. Biblical text spoke of that quite often. Prime example was when hold on, y'all. My apologies. Prime example was when who was that had to sacrifice their son? Was that yes, that was Abraham who, in biblical texts, right, is written that Abraham would have received this requirement of God. And we've spoken about this a lot of times. God and Lord in the Bible is referencing a man that is in a position of power. So this God would have told Abraham, hey, I require a sacrifice of you. And that sacrifice is going to be your son. So I need you to prove to me that you are, in fact, loyal. Prove your loyalty to me by sacrificing your own son. And so Abraham would have carried on, and taken his son up to the mountain, strapped him down, was getting ready to literally barbecue him, right? And then he will say, oh, but the angel came, which is the messenger of that God, that master, and said, hey, you know what? You don't even have to go that far. We see that you're willing to do it. So yeah, you're loyal. You're in. Okay. You're in the secret society, right? And Abraham will go on. Abraham will go on to have a lot of wealth, right? Royalty, placed in a very high position, and to receive pretty much that crown because he was willing to be a faithful servant to that God that will have directed him to take the life of his son. But consider, there are a lot of Abrahams out here. There are a lot of beings out here who not only felt that they was instructed by the deity before they could get that wealth, before they could get that fame, before they could get that notoriety or that power or whatever it is that they was trying to get, their sacrifice will have been of a human being that they loved. This happens far too often. And it was claimed to be a conspiracy theory for a long time. But now in the age of I know, a lot of truths are being exposed about what's really been happening behind the scenes in order for a lot of these beings to receive this wealth, this power, this notoriety. And so this is the form of alchemy that is way too complex. It's way too wicked. And it definitely goes against spiritual law, without a doubt. From our origin, we did not move that way. We would not sacrifice the life of someone else for the sake of wealth, for the sake of something material here in this 3D plane. Never. And this is why what's required of these beings who have used that form of alchemy, they're always required. There's something always very painful that is required from them, whether it's public humiliation or whether it's losing someone that they love, or whether it's, it's always something, whether it's their sexual energy, okay, literally taking their manhood or their womanhood, whatever you want to call it. Like, there's a whole lot that's required of them when their source of sorcery comes from a very low vibrational wicked space. The type of alchemy that the chosen is guided to do begins with the mind. We change the way that we think. We commit ourselves to that, and aligning with the highest vibrational frequency, aligning with the frequency of love and integrity. And all of these things in our material realm begin to take shape and to form around that vision, those thoughts, those ideas. Now, can we utilize tools to help to enhance that thing? Absolutely. I personally was taught by my spiritual team in the spiritual realm to work with the element of fire as my predominant source. It could be because I'm an Aries, but I do find that when I begin writing things down and burning them, it was a very powerful way of shifting my internal space as well as my external experience. When you write things down on paper, you take a thought that is up in the ethers, is in the spiritual realm, is unseen. Okay. You put it on paper and you make it tangible. Now there's evidence of that thought because it's written down. If it's something that you do not want, then you use the element of fire and you burn it. Now you will have eyewitnessed that thing that was a hindrance, whether it's internal or external. You will have eyewitnessed the destruction of that thing through the powerful element of fire. And of course, you give thanks to the Most High and your spiritual team for assisting you with the rest, because there is more. But these may be things that you don't have as much access to because you still are flesh. You still operate in this physical avatar. On the other side, you may be gravitated towards candles, which for me, my spiritual team in the spiritual realm showed me, hey, if you're going to write down the things that you want to manifest, why not fuel it? Why not give it the fuel of fire to help send it up, right? And even though a lot of these rocket ships ain't going no damn where, it does show you that fire is a powerful element to push things up into the ethers, right? To push things up into the atmosphere. And so for me, I was told, after spending a lot of time writing things down, journaling, I was told, hey, but you could put those things on a candle too, If you really want to get that thing up there and to give it a boost, use the element of fire through your candles to send that energy up. And that's what I began doing, writing down what I wanted to create and putting it on candles. You can use the alchemy of colors. Colors is very, very powerful. When you're thinking about a blank canvas, it's colors, whether even if it's just neutral colors, or whether they're very bright and pigmented, colors is what brings it to life. So working with colors is a very powerful tool of alchemy. It can shift certain things in your brain. Okay, it can trigger certain emotions. Okay, it can calm you, it can excite you, it can fuel passion within you. That's why when it comes down to different restaurants and stuff, many of them gravitate towards the colors of yellow, right? Yellow, red, orange. These particular colors activate the lower chakras. And so a lot of the fast food restaurants, they understand that in order to have that feeling of gluttony or that insatiable appetite for something that you shouldn't have, you're going to have to operate from those lower chakras in order to gravitate towards that particular type of restaurant. And it doesn't mean that you stay on that frequency all the time, but they understand that in order to get you in that space to desire it, if they're going to really activate that urge to want it, then they're going to need to target your lower chakras. So colors are a very powerful tool. And this is why you may gravitate to candles that are specific colors. That's why I always tell you all, if you're going to go and get you some candles, get all of the colors of the chakras, because this will actually enhance your alchemy when you are being very specific about the color of the candle that you're using, paired with your written word, your thoughts, your emotions, the element of fire. And of course, air is in that energy as well, because without air, there's no fire. So all of these things come together to create something, but this is a very simple form of alchemy. It's not complex. When you start getting off into those complex things, it's going to be complex sacrifices that will be required of you in order to give back to that source what it gave to you. And this is why a lot of these beings, such as the diddler, he's one of them. He's definitely a warlock, right? He's a warlock. And he developed this idea that sex magic was his thing. That became his form of alchemy, but he took it too far, right? He started using it. He had an insatiable appetite, working with his lower three chakras and targeting the lower three chakras of others in order to enhance his power. Okay. One thing that people need to recognize, that this spiritual / human experience, it comes in layers. There's a duality in all things, right? There's the highest point, there's the lowest point, and there's everything in between. But there's no such thing as the highest point, because the thing's going for infinity, and there's no such thing as the lowest point, but there's everything in between, right? So people like Diddy decide to work with their lower nature and lower vibrational beings, lower vibrational magic, in order to get things that places them in a position of power in the underworld. Whereas there's others, those of us who work with higher vibrational source, higher vibrational frequency, the frequency of love, the frequency of healing, the frequency of enlightenment, okay? Higher vibrational angelic beings who are of love and righteousness, who have a care for humanity and the healing of humanity, right? We're calling on these types of beings, and we're using words. If you're going to chant, you may be using affirmations of empowerment, affirmations of healing, affirmations of, creativity. You're doing it from a space of love and integrity. And by the time you receive what is inherently yours through that alchemy, there's nothing old of you. You have not accumulated a ton of karmic debt as a result of getting what you have. And so Diddy is a prime example of spiritual law violation. Whereas a lot of people will look at his case, because to be quite frank with you all, is really coming down to the evidence that's been presented. I haven't followed it 100%, but anytime I have checked in, the evidence that they are presenting is going to really bring about like a slap on the wrist for Diddy. Okay. I'm just being straight with y'all. As much as many of you are like, you want to see him behind bars forever, it's not going to happen. Because the evidence that they're bringing is not enough of a violation. Like I said, I haven't seen everything. So don't come for me if you find that there is some things that was like, whoa, you don't think, but I haven't seen enough of the evidence. But from what I have seen, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, I haven't seen enough of a violation to put him away for the rest of his life. However, my spiritual eyes, way before he was even his name was brought up in the media about doing things nefarious behind the scenes, my spiritual eyes saw him in the spiritual realm. And I saw him doing things that was spiritual violation. He and many others doing things that are spiritual violations. Okay. Doing spell work on the masses, pulling on people's sexual energy in order to enhance their power. Okay. All types of things that was being done by these particular beings, literal sacrifices. Okay. human sacrifices, these things have not been brought up in court in terms of him taking anybody's life or things of that nature, but I spiritually see it through my spiritual eyes. And so, because of his spiritual violation, his punishment is actually going to be far worse, even if that means that he is free walking the streets within the next 5 to 10 years. His punishment is going to be far worse than being placed behind bars for the rest of his life, because the spiritual violation is far worse than the physical one. It's those things that are unseen. But that's where you have the higher courts. That's where the chosen seed, we come together and we call judgment upon the powers that were. We call judgment upon the so-called elite and those who have acquired wealth and power through wickedness and rituals and spells over humanity. We call judgment. And because we've called judgment, oh, judgment is being brought down. It will not be avoided. He can't get around it, nor can those other so-called celebrities or politicians or religious leaders or whoever you want to call these people that are in a position of so-called power. They are not getting away with it either. Even though you don't see them in court, in the headlines, being spoken about throughout social media, and everything is coming to forefront. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean that they're not being judged. Oh, yes, they are very much so being judged. And many of them will wish, they are hoping, they are begging that their judgment can take place here in the 3D realm rather than in the spiritual realm, because they know the spiritual violation. Oh, it's been very, very, very sinister. So I myself, I'm not worried if they end up letting Diddy out or giving him a slap on the wrist, because I understand that spiritual judgment is far more harsh. And that is something that he cannot avoid, because we've already placed that intention out there that himself and anyone else like him, they're being judged. So getting back to alchemy, the things that we do as chosen seed is far more simple. Okay. It's very organic. It's not complex. It keeps us connected to nature. It allows us to recognize that it's not always about quick fixes. It's not always about seeing things happen right away. We understand the process of cultivation. You get to that place of understanding that when you plant particular seeds, there is a time, there's a period, there's a season for everything, and you start to flow with the seasons. You start to flow with the seasons. You start to flow with the cycles. You start to flow with the elements, and you begin to realize that you don't want it to happen overnight. Those people that are desperate to see things happen in their life overnight will generally gravitate to the more complex side of alchemy, and they'll get themselves caught up in some shit practically every single time, because they don't see the value in cultivation or growth that takes place naturally. They're so far removed from nature that the only thing that they're thinking about is pleasing their carnal nature right now, pleasing their ego right now. I want to be rich today. I want to have that car today. I want to have that business, and all of that profit coming in today. And because there's such a sense of urgency without appreciating the cultivation process, they end up calling in their source, the sorcery that they use, and the source that they actually connect to is generally a low vibrational being that is also very hungry for something right now. And so they end up requiring something from that person right now. And a lot of times it looks like human sacrifice, or siphoning someone's energy, or doing spell work against another chosen seed in order to block their gifts or to block their advancement. That's what's really happening. That's what the spiritual warfare is all about, because you have a lot of people who have gotten access to spiritual understanding, but that have perverted it. And so the warfare has been against the chosen seed, who would eventually awaken and understand that, oh no, this is my inheritance. It is my birthright to use this gift of alchemy to transmute and to shift my experience here and that of my lineage. That is your birthright. And this is not about, because a lot of people shy away from the material experience. And there's a season for everything, right? So, of course, there's a time on your journey where you're more focused than you should be. First focus should be your spiritual evolving, right? Being able to rise into your divinity and to become the best version of yourself. That should be your number one first focus. Breaking the generational curses, clearing out traumas in your lineage and karmic debt, and breaking those karmic contracts and clearing out past life traumas and all of these things. First focus. But as above, so below. When you begin to shift things in a spiritual realm in order to balance things out and to create a form of peace in a spiritual realm for yourself and your lineage and those who have crossed over and all of these things, then after you've done that assignment, your next mission should be the so below. Because if you don't use that alchemy to also shift your physical experience, your 3D human experience, those things that are tangible, then you will be in survival mode. And eventually you will have developed and created so many different traumas being in survival mode that you will then have to go back and clean up do all of that work all over again that you just did in the spiritual realm. And a prime example of that is, let's just say you've done all of that work spiritually, but you are just completely against doing any alchemy to shift your physical 3D experience. So you don't want to do any alchemy to enhance your wealth. You don't want to do any alchemy to enhance your security. You don't want to do any alchemy to enhance your health or to enhance your physical makeup or the relationships in your life. You don't want to do any alchemy there. So you leave all of that in turmoil and utter chaos, right? Because in the matrix, that's how it's been set up for you to always remain in survival mode. So a lot of people that become spiritual or that go on a spiritual pathway, it's like, I don't want to touch anything in a 3D. I don't care about money. I don't care. And you shouldn't care about money, but you should care about currency. I don't care about currency. I don't care about wealth. I don't care about my living circumstances. It's all about my spirit evolving. Those people who think that way end up having a lot to clean up because they don't see the shift happening in their 3D reality because they've already put it out into the ethers that they don't care about it. They're already doing alchemy and they don't even know it by simply saying that you don't care about currency. You don't care about security. You don't care about having, a car that's reliable. You don't care about, these particular 3D things. By saying you don't care about it shows a level of detachment, right? Anytime you don't care about something, you neglect it. And if you neglect it, then let's just say you neglect your house because you don't care about your household, right? You so focused on other things, you don't care about your house. By neglecting your house, it's going to collect dust, it's going to collect mold, it's going to look a hot, funky, crusty, dusty, musty mess, right? That comes with the territory of neglecting something and not caring about it. So when you are constantly putting out into the universe, I don't care about this. I don't care about, all of these 3D things that your avatar needs in order to thrive, then you will neglect it. And that neglecting of those things will begin to manifest in a form of chaos. And it'll keep you in survival mode. And in survival mode, you attract others who are in survival mode. You attract situations and scenarios that'll also place you further and further into survival mode, so much so that you develop so many warrior scars. It's just a constant battle of just trying to stay alive, fighting to stay alive, fighting to pay the bills that's due next month, fighting to keep the lights on, fighting to keep a morsel of bread on your table, fighting to make sure that you have clothes that don't have holes in them and shoes that have, good soles, fighting to keep a car that doesn't break down every other month. When you stay in that energy, little by little, that all of that work that you've done on your spirit to become a higher, a better person or to rise into your divinity, it gets chipped away at until you end up having to do that work all over again. And if you never get to that point of seeing the value in doing alchemy on your 3D experience, then you will pass that energy down to your offspring who will also end up in survival mode. And so if this is passed down from one generation to the next, only focus on spirit, don't care anything about shifting your 3D experience. And this is passed down from one generation to the next. This will be generation after generation of people that are in survival mode. And what happens now, you end up with a lineage all over again. You have to break that chain all over again off of your lineage of traumas, karma, and all types of built up things, because that one person who had that spiritual understanding did not want to also use that alchemy to shift their 3D reality. So you have it's your mission, it's your assignment to not only focus on shifting things in the spiritual realm for yourself and your lineage, but to also use that gift of alchemy to shift your 3D experience. That way you could pass down generational wealth. You could teach your children to shift their 3D reality. But it's too many people that only give a damn about the 3D. Because there's, like I said, it needs to be balanced on both ends. So I just gave you a scenario of what could happen if you're solely focused on the spiritual and you have no care for the material. But then there's another side to this. For those who have learned alchemy and they only care about the material, but don't give a damn about spiritual evolution. They don't give a damn about breaking generational curses. These things don't even cross their mind. And so what happens is they accumulate all of this shit, all of this stuff, to the point where they're spiritually just dead, right? They're constantly seeking, I must need more power then. I must need more money then. If I'm not happy and I got all of this over here, then I must need more power. They've developed an insatiable appetite for things that go outside of their nature. Now they start to feel more empowered when they take a life. Now they feel more empowered when they're playing Russian roulette with somebody's energy, or when they're doing spell work against these people over here, or when they're, whatever. It's always going to take them to something very low vibrational and nefarious, without a doubt, right? They end up committing sexual acts that go well outside of their nature because it makes them feel more powerful to be able to violate someone and to get away with it. You see what I'm saying? Because they never come into the realization, they're steady groping, looking for more. Okay, tangible things. I already got everything. So now I need to fulfill my ego. My ego says I need more power. My ego says that people need to fear me more. You see what I'm saying? And that's where you have a lot of these so-called wealthy people out here. They are a prime example of what that looks like. So it really comes down to on this spiritual journey, you may have somebody that gets on this walk and they was born into nothing but wealth. Or you have someone who gets on this walk and they come in with absolutely nothing. What you ultimately come to realize is that the person that has everything has nothing. And the person who has nothing already possesses everything. And it's a matter of understanding what that means for you on an individual level. The person who has everything, who really has nothing, is the one who had everything around them. They had access to everything. They could travel whenever they want to. They spend, X amount of money on meals and bags and shoes and clothes and houses. And they have everything that you could ever desire in the material realm, just to come to realize that they have nothing at all, because none of it was ever fulfilling enough to their soul. Then you have those who have nothing. And they get to that space where, okay, they start to accumulate just to realize they always had everything. It was always in them. It was always within them to create. It was always within them to manifest. All they had to do was shift their thoughts. I had not even realizing that they already had everything that they needed, because it existed within them. How do you process what's happening to you? How do you view your spiritual and human experience? What are you thinking about on a daily basis? Are you in a space of gratitude? Are you able to find the sweet spots in life, not realizing that they already possessed everything that they need? The breath of life, they have all four elements. A huge altar is accessible to them. Every time that they step outside of their home, they have earth, wind, water, fire, the sun, the wind, the earth, the water. Everything has always been directly accessible to them, but because they was looking for it in material evidence, They never realized that they already possessed everything in order to get those material things that they needed. So there's a polarity to everything, but we all have to come to this point of, you know, recognizing that there is a pathway that forms balance. As above, so below. Okay? As above, so below. So don't neglect one over the other. Put just as much emphasis on both, but there's an order by which it has to be done. If you start with the material realm first, then you will be spiritually void. If you only focus on the spiritual, then you will be materially void. But you always start with the spiritual first, but you don't get stuck there, recognizing that you also have to focus on creating that life that allows you to thrive. So I hope this message brought you all clarity about alchemy, why it's so imperative to be used on a spiritual journey, how it must be used, ways that you don't want to use it. And of course, I will be having this conversation again in the future with you all. So I look forward to diving even deeper on and getting others' perspectives and having you all join in that conversation as well. So like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Let me know if you received anything from this message, if there's anything that you want to add, and I'll talk to y'all next time.